So let's start right off the bat with how to prioritize self-care in your life and what that looks like for you, because I think it's so important. You address this right up front early on in your podcast, but tell me about your journey in this and how you got there.
Well, I suffered.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth? Isn't that usually how we get there? Yep.
Yeah. And I had to go through a lot of enough is enough moments to really get to a place where I was like, whoa, this is just not working. Self-care for me has little to do with the acts like we are taught as a culture, and it has more to do with the mindset. And there's plenty of your guests that have said this. I'm not the first one, but coming from a place of I'm a bad mom every single day made everything worse. And so I needed to get to a place where that mindset was I'm a good mom that makes mistakes.
Yes.
And it took a very committed practice, which I use gratitude for, but it was about that shift. And it was being patient and setting an intention, like you said, and really being like purposeful with my thoughts and the way that I looked at a bad situation or a tough situation and evaluated it. Yeah. And so self-care for me is not any kind of act or any kind of thing. It's a mindset.
Yeah.
And it's about deliberate mindset. And recognizing the one that you have already and saying, okay, this might be where I need to do some work. And then setting a goal for what you want instead.
Yeah. And because I think that intention behind it, like I said earlier, you've got to have a plan in place, or it's just going to be a thing you want every day, but there's not going to be any intention. And it starts with recognizing like, this isn't working. I need to do something different. And then setting that intention behind it. And you give such practical tools for that. Yes, again, listeners, I know I keep saying this, but take a listen. Great tools, great tips. And a lot of what we're going to be talking about today in just making that intention, prioritizing that. That's not selfish. It's important. It makes you a better human. It makes you a better woman. It makes you a better mom, partner, friend, all the things. And you will, because it gives you something to give from. And so important. Confidently setting boundaries, because you're doing a lot of things now. So what does that look like for you?
What's interesting about boundaries is that people always say you need to have them, right? Yeah. And then it's like, but why don't I have them?
Right.
And for me, it was 100% because I was a perfectionist. And so my boundaries were around, my lack of boundaries was around the idea that I needed to be perfect. And so I martyred myself for that cause. No one else did it to me. It might have felt that way in the past, but no one was doing that to me. I was martyring myself for the goal of perfectionism. And being perfect is an unachievable goal. And so here you go. We're stuck in this cycle. And it's not just a cycle of wanting to be amazing and good and the best mother ever or the best woman ever even. It's the shame that comes when you don't achieve that. And then you get into this spiral and it's not an upward spiral. You don't go anywhere. It's really not great. But the boundaries come from accepting the fact that you're not going to be perfect. And like, that's in its own self. It's little practice.
Yeah.
And absolutely. I use the mantra, I don't have to be perfect to be me. And it's a way to shift my perspective and to remind myself that actually the goal is to be imperfect.
Yes.
And I can achieve that every day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so boundaries have a new meaning to me because what I'm doing is I'm saying, instead of saying yes, I'm going to say no to that. And I'm going to say no to that because I don't need to be perfect. I don't need to do everything in column A for wife, everything in column B for woman, everything in column C for mother, everything in column D for worker. I don't need to do everything in all of the columns.
Yeah.
I can pick and choose. And the way that my spreadsheet fills out, if you want to go there, is uneven.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's the goal. If my spreadsheet's full and perfect, something is happening here that's not, on the sheet, which is called burnout.
Exactly. And exhaustion and not showing up as your best self. And I think I love you say something that I think is so important, that you've chosen happiness over perfection. And I think that is like, oh my gosh. Yeah. And I think too, you talked about something really important. We feel like we have to be this way. I think we forget as women that we have choices. Regardless of what's being told us around it, we have a choice whether we're going to buy into that or not. We have a choice. Now, there's a lot of pressure. Yeah. And you have your, one of your latest episodes talks about comparison and the danger of that. And we're not meant to walk somebody else's walk. We're meant to walk our walk for our life, for our family, for our kids and ourselves. And I loved that, how you chose that. I'm like, that is just so important. Take the pressure off and realize that you have choices and utilize those choices.
And I think that figuring all that stuff out comes from learning how to take a moment and self-reflect.
Yeah. Yeah.
And underneath everything we probably talk about today is going to be those moments. Because you can't just figure this stuff out.
No.
I did not know that I did not like decorating my house for every holiday. I grew up with a parent that was a teacher. We celebrated every single holiday to the max.
Yeah.
I thought this is what you did.
Oh,
So I did that for 6-7 years of my parenthood. And it was a lot with 2 kids and full-time job. It was a lot.
Yeah.
And it only changed when I stopped and I took a minute and I said, is this what I really want?
Yeah.
Do I really care about this? And it was like, oh no, I really don't. This takes a lot of time, space in my house. It makes me feel stressed because there's extra clutter. Then it takes time after the holiday to take down. And then I feel the pressure to get to a clean house after it. It was making my life a little bit more chaotic than necessary. Yeah. And what I discovered when I put that down, and it took a few years, and my children grew up, my kids chose the holidays that they really liked. And then they started decorating.
Oh, I love that.
I know. And now I have this 10-year-old who's insane about Halloween. He just does Halloween. He does it up. And I'm like, okay. And I go all in on Halloween with him. But, I don't do it for him. I'm just there. I'm like, oh, I'll put a nail here, or I'll buy you some more crows. He's like, I need more crows. I'm like, okay. It's a totally different experience. And I would not have gotten there if I hadn't sat down and said, is this making me feel good?
Right. And taking 2 seconds. Yeah. 2 seconds to be mindful. You talk about mindfulness. Yes. And then how does my body feel right now? Am I just seized up and tense and trying to whip this out? Or am I feeling some calmness and some joy and some, enjoyment? And I love how you flipped it too. Now your son loves Halloween. It's something you guys are doing together. It's completely flips the script on that. And he's going to remember that and have that such a great memory of you gave him and trusted him with that passion, with that intention. You gave him some freedom to express. That's so cool. I loved how you flipped that, but it's just taking 30 seconds even sometimes.
And when I let go of the perfectionism around the decor, the other thing I gave to him was he could do it whatever way he wanted. And I didn't care. Yeah. I was like, I don't care what it looks like at all. I'm still putting it on Instagram because I'm proud.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I love that. That's so much. And that just does so much for kids as they're developing and how they feel about how they express themselves and the confidence with which they're able to do that with. I love that. There's so much in that. Taking care of our emotional health as much as our physical health. What are some practices that you use to process your emotions in a healthy way so they don't become stored up in your body? And that's tough to do when you're a mom. You're just like, especially, and you have a whole episode on sleep. I mean, all these things that are happening, sleep deprivation. And I think we lose sight of the burnout and the frazzlement, I don't know if that's a word, that we can feel, not just as moms, but as women trying to do it all and stepping back and like, we got to take care of these things or they're going to show up later. I mean, that's what happened to me. I landed in the ER at 50 years old with all this unprocessed emotions that were showing up as physical symptoms. And there was nothing physically wrong with me. It was just a boatload of, 30 plus years of unprocessed emotions. So talk to me about your journey with that.
I call that your enough is enough moment.
Yeah.
And I've had 3 or 4 of those and ignored most of them or I got to them and said, but I don't know what to do now.
Yeah.
Right. So I kept going, looking outside myself the whole time, of course. And
Absolutely.
my final one was I was working at a startup 60, 70 hours a week. I had 2 kids under the age of 6 and a husband who worked 12-hour days. We lived in the most expensive city in the country. And it was so insane, but I was doing it supposedly. And my body said no. And it was the same. My body said, no, you're not. And I lost feeling in my entire left arm. And thank you, body, for not doing my right arm because I had kids. But my entire left arm was done. And I went to a masseuse and she said, you need to learn to breathe. And I was like, what?
Yes. Right. I've heard that something about that. Yes. We don't breathe when we're stressed. And that's where I got told to start doing breathing exercises every hour to stop and do some box breathing. So I hear you. I'm like, how do we not fall over?
It was so interesting because she was like, I really can't do any work on you because you're so tense. And I was like, okay. And she's like, and I think you should probably try some really restorative yoga. And so I started going to yoga and I was like, oh, this is really nice. It feels nourishing. And I started looking into meditation more deeply because when you're in the long poses, that's what you're doing. And meditation really was interesting to me. But it was bringing up a lot of really tough things. And that's what happens when you decide to wade into the water, right? I mean, let's be honest. And so I was like, I need to get a therapist. And so I found a therapist that had a meditation background that was very into mindfulness. And I've been working with him for 6 years. We just talked about it yesterday. He's like, how long have you been coming? I'm like, 6 years. He's like, wow. Yeah, you've grown, Stef. And everything changed because I decided to go there.
Yes.
And I
give yourself permission.
And I was courageous. And it takes a lot of courage to do that. It was dicey in there. And, it's still dicey. I have a lot of my own stuff I'm working on and it's there. And so I like to look at now that I've kind of invested a little bit of that time in myself and I found that it wasn't actually scary. I mean, it was hard, but it wasn't detrimental. All emotions are welcome.
Yes. And there's no such thing as a bad emotion. There's signals.
There's comfortable and uncomfortable.
Yes, absolutely.
That's what a great way to put it.
Yep.
And I just actually edited an episode of the podcast will be out when this comes out that I did a visualization with people where I said, okay, take a neutral object in your house, just like a hair tie. Take that stressful situation you've been thinking about. Let's infuse that hair tie with that stressful situation. Let's put it down in a neutral place in your house. Now let's take up like a chapstick, another neutral item, and fill it with everything positive that you're looking forward to tomorrow, right? And now place that on the windowsill next to the hair tie. And I want you to look at them. They're both there. They're both part of a well-lived life. They are both not better or worse than one another. They just are. And sure, you can pick one up and feel their intensity, and you can pick up the other one and feel the intensity. But in reality, their intensities are actually the same chemical makeup that goes through your body. Mm-hmm. That's just been proven. It's like excitement and stress, same exact thing in your body.
Yeah.
And so, and you could put in the show notes that study, but it's just when we look at those stressful emotions or the uncomfortable ones and the comfortable ones as both welcome, everything just becomes a little bit easier.
Yes.
And
we quit fighting it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And temporary. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, I know what I've been in therapy, on my third round of therapy, but this one I've been in 3+ years. And it was just that whole, you said something so important earlier. They just are. And my therapist kept working with me because I was very hypervigilant. I very much rated types of emotions and the way I experience them in terms of importance or, all those things. And I was able to finally be like, I can sit in all of this and welcome it all and process it all. And something that's really helped me, I will write down in my journaling, I write down how I'm feeling today, every day. And it's all the emotions that I'm feeling. And everything that I think that's really interesting is every single day, there is room in all of it for being grateful, for being thankful, for being hopeful. Those are always in there every day. But so is like, I'm feeling anxious. I'm really tired. I'm discouraged. And I identify all those different things. So I'm not denying anything. And it allows me to welcome them all in. And that has helped my gratefulness and my just whole practice of this realization of like, it's not a dualistic thing. And we can sit and feel all those things. So thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. And yes, that study will be in the show notes because it's so important. When you look at that, I saw it when it first came out. I was like, that's so interesting because that is not what our minds are telling us about that. But yet here it is showing up chemically in our body the same exact way. I'm like, that's fascinating. Body is fascinating. But we got to listen to it and see it as our friend and see those emotions as signals of things that need to be walked through and dealt with. Thank you so much for sharing that. How can we support ourselves and other women in living unapologetically? And you're doing it. Like you're doing it. Like you're literally like walking this out. So talk to me about that and how you got to this spot of like, I think I can help here.
Well, we should start there. I am actually a professional nanny of 20 years. So I've been working with families for a long time.
Sure.
And being that support system, being that shoulder to cry on, and the person that like literally tells people, no, that's normal. You're doing okay. Like that's your job, right?
Right.
No, that's normal. Oh, your child's wonderful. What? No, you're doing great. And so that's my background. And I love to say that when it comes to supporting ourselves and other women, we could talk about comparison again, right?
Sure.
But I like to spin that around and I like to say, Melissa and I and all the other moms, we all chatted and we all agreed that you're fucking awesome. And the thing is that moms are always jealous of each other because we think other moms are amazing.
Yeah.
And we're missing that part. Like let's be honest, shame is very seductive. So, I'm not going to overlook that. It's extremely seductive. But if we can look at, or if we can listen to our bestie when she says, you're doing awesome, and actually take it in as true, comparison's not a big deal. Comparison is just other people telling us that we're awesome.
Oh, I love that. I love that flip on that. That's such a great flip.
Yes.
That's so important. And just an idea of like, you can take this thing and make it whatever you want it to be and what it should be and how it's healthiest for you. I love that. That's thank you so much for that. The importance of setting and coming back to your why / your values and everything you do. And it kind of, how do you identify that and set that stage for yourself and your family and the choices you make?
So what's interesting is that for a long time, when I was really hitting those enough is enough moments and I didn't know what to do, I went to books. I went to parenting books. I went to parenting workshops. I furthered my career as a nanny, actually. Like, it was good. But I was so still struggling. And the reason I was struggling is because, one, I was being unintentional. Right. I was just trying to fix. And I was like, this is not right. I know it's not right. And so I really found more strength once I decided that I wanted to be a better parent. And I know that sounds like, not so great, but it was a great place for me to start, because what I did was I slowed down enough to actually just be intentional. So there's that. But as I went along my journey and I started to look inside instead of outside myself, I realized that being a better parent really was actually just as hurtful, because that meant I wasn't one.
Right.
And so I needed to relook at that intention and really decide, what did I want? And so for me, I took the parent right out. I said, I need to just look at what I want, like me.
Yes. Yeah.
And I just wanted to be a happier human. Right? I just wanted to be a happier human. And things like holiday decorations and, PTA meetings weren't making me happy.
Yeah.
They just weren't. And so I was like, I need to just stop doing these things. And my intention became to be a happier human. And that was so much stronger than my drive for perfection ever was, and my need for being better or to fix, because it changed the lens I viewed all my choices through.
Yes.
And so now I call it my good as fuck mom intention. And I think all moms and all women, good as fuck women, should set an intention and really, like, let's name it that, because it really it gives it importance. It makes it like, and it also, like, I look at it, I check it, every year, and I make sure, does this feel right to me? And it still does, for sure.
Yeah. I think that's so important. And just, it's like, does this line up? And if it doesn't line up, all right, that's not where we're going. And that's okay, because it doesn't matter what Susie next door is doing. She's got it covered for me. I don't need to cover everything. I love that. That's so good. Living out of your own expectations versus others. You talk about in the podcast, your podcast, about how I've been a nanny for all these years, which automatically means parenting will be, I will be wonderful because I've got all this experience. So you had your own expectation you're dealing with, not to mention expectations of the world in general on women. So talk to me about expectations and learning how to live out of your own, adjusting them accordingly and versus others.
Yeah, I think that it's not really about too high or too low of expectations. And it's about learning how to ground your expectations in your intention.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, our happiness is held at the mercy of always trying to control an outcome, right?
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
And so if you're trying to control an outcome, no, it's not going to turn out how you think it's going to turn out. And so we have to be intentional about even our expectations. And as a parent, that is actually a great thing to do with your kids too. Right. Because having cultural in expectations around your kids sometimes can set you up for failure or feeling like a failure. I didn't teach my 10-year-old how to tie his shoes. I don't think I didn't teach my 14-year-old how to tie his shoes either. Yeah. No, I said, you know what? I'm struggling with this. This is the busiest time of day for us. We're trying to leave the house and I'm trying to teach something and they're not really into it. Like they don't, they're not like, and it could have been my delivery because I was rushed. Who knows? And I was like, this is something where I'm going to say no. Yeah. I'm going to ground my expectation in what I want. And what I want is to get out of this house without making these children upset and sad before they go to school. Just because I'm getting more and more triggered. Right.
Right.
And so I bought them slip-on shoes. I brought them Velcro shoes and they wore them for years. And when they were ready, they learned how to tie their shoes.
Yes.
On their own. Yeah. My youngest, his best friend taught him. Works fine. It's like, absolutely. It's the cultural expectation that it's my job to teach them that, not necessarily. Like, this is not a world in which we have no shoes with Velcro anymore.
Right. Absolutely.
Like, this is a world in which we can totally wear slip-on shoes until you're 30. Like, not an issue. Not an issue. My younger one doesn't ride a bike. He doesn't. Yeah. We have not been able to do that as a family with him. Not happening. My older one rides a bike. Not an issue. We've decided that that's how it is, right? Yeah. And so it's not really like sometimes I want to say like lower your expectations to moms, just because I feel like we do put a lot of expectations on our kids. We do. But I think that we really need to look at that more. Like I said, it's you got to ground your expectations in their development, ground your expectations in empathy. Ground your expectations in compassion. There's other things that you can ground your expectations in besides the cultural norm.
Yeah, I love that. And those are two great examples of just timeless expectations that have been out there. And that's just random. So important. It is random. I mean, and I saw it with my own kids. My oldest, she literally just taught herself how to tie her shoes. And she did it at an early age. And I was like, oh, great. Okay. Cool. My middle one wasn't as concerned about it. I think her and her best friend worked it out by second grade, but it, just wasn't something she was losing sleep over. And I think that's another thing. Look at your kid too and where they are. Every kid's wired differently, wants different things, cares about different things. And so, take a look at that too. Some of them care more about riding bikes and doing those things than others. Some of them are like, just not my thing. I'd rather just run around and be on my scooter and throw on my Velcro shoes and call it a day and be perfectly happy. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think too, especially when my youngest, she was just trying to keep up with the other two. So she wanted to do all the things because she would, because she was just chasing after and wanting to be part of what they were doing. But even look at each kid. But I love that you spoke to those two things. I think it's so important. We put so much pressure on ourselves. And how many times have we seen the kids on the sidewalk crying? They're trying. The parents are behind them on the bike and nobody wants to be there, but they feel like it has to be done. Oh my gosh.
That was like me putting up Christmas decorations, like screaming and crying and like flipping out. And it's like, what? Yeah. Or the other example I use for expectations, and it's more a mindset thing for moms or even really just anyone, is the idea that we have to cook 7 nights a week.
Yes.
And then if we order takeout, we are lazy. We literally call ourselves lazy. And it's I
hate that word.
Oh my God. Or let's look at the week and let's say out loud, do I want to cook every night of the week? No, I don't. Okay. Do I want to get takeout 2 nights a week? Do I want my partner to cook 1 night a week, 5 nights a week? Right. What is the next step here? And then when you have grounded yourself in that conversation and those expectations that 2 nights a week we're getting takeout, 1 night a week I'm cooking, 2 nights we figured that out. The lazy word goes away on the night you get takeout. All of a sudden you're free. And you're like, this is the best because I'm getting takeout because it's our night to get takeout. You're not lazy. That's just part of the routine.
Yeah. And it takes the shame out of it too. And just because I don't like to cook. I do not like to cook. My husband currently does most, if not all, the cooking. There was a time for about 10 years where I did more of it because I was at home and he was still working full time. The kids talk about that. They're like, oh, remember when mom used to cook? I literally had like a 3 or 4 meal rotation because that's just all I wanted to do. But I love that. Let's just name it, call it, take the shame off it, take the expectation off it. What works for our family? What works for me?
Right.
What works, I love that. Great. Such good stuff. I'm so glad you brought that one up. Accepting the layered aspects of ourselves. That's all the stuff that makes us who we are. Talk to me about your journey with layers.
That's an interesting one because I think that without my gratitude practice, I wouldn't have been able to get to where I am with my identity work. So making a list. So typically I make a list of 5 to 10 things I'm grateful for every morning. And I do change because you have to really focus on the intensity over the number. Making that list taught me to look over my yesterdays and to really see what was working and to let go of the tantrum and target or what was clouding my mind. And when I did that, it made me actually like a lot more mindful. I mean, it did. It had to, because I was like in moments and going, wow, this is going to be good for my gratitude list. And during that time, I realized that I wasn't just a type A mom. So I've always considered myself a type A mom, and I use it in a positive way now. But I wasn't just a type A mom. I actually am very much a free spirit. And a type A. So I'm a type A free spirit. And I don't need to deny either parts of those parts of me. Those parts of me can be together. I know they feel opposite, but in my body and in my soul, they're not. They're what makes me me. And there is room for and there's not. This is that and versus or conversation. And I think that we have many layers that we deny because they don't feel like they fit, even if they are true.
Right. We decide that can't be true. Right.
Well, because it feels weird. Like, how can you be a free spirit and be super type A and have keep a spreadsheet of Christmas gifts? And it's like, I don't know, but that's what I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's really but without that mindfulness to notice and to come to a place of acceptance around that, I would be still fighting that battle inside.
Yeah. I love that place of acceptance. And I also love too how you identify those two that seem very different things, but I also remembering we might show up in one context with our girlfriends in one way and show up with our kids in another way and with our partners some other way and our job some other way. And those are all parts of us. And we don't have to show up the same way everywhere, nor should we, or we're truly not diving into all the pieces of who we are. But it begins with that acceptance and being okay with that. And I think the practices you've put into place just are so helpful in that space. And remembering to, you talked about curious as one of your character traits. Yeah. Continue to be curious. Continue to look at your days with curiosity, not criticism. Change your C words. And, instead of being critical, be curious. How did I get here? What did I learn from that and moving forward that I can maybe, if I want to show up differently, or I can see it coming, but trading in, criticism for curiosity, I think is really important in our layered journey too. And then that helps us to be grateful rather than beating up on ourselves. It's all tied together. It just goes back to that taking time to be mindful and reflecting that we talked about earlier. In living out feel, finding empowerment, embracing layers, how does this affect your relationship with yourself and then in turn, relationship with others?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it comes down to acceptance.
Mm,
It's so interesting. And I mean, we have been in the past 3-4 years, we've been through a lot as a society. And I fought it for so long when the pandemic hit. And it was so hard for me, especially being a type A.
Sure.
And I had, after, things died down and my kids went back to school and my husband finally went back to work, I had these whiplash moments where he would stay home. He didn't want to go in, so he would stay home, or my kids would be sick and I would get almost like this panic. It was like panic inside where I was like, it's going to happen again. I know it. No one's going to leave. No one's going to leave. I'm never going to get anything that I want done. I can't nourish myself. It was very much post-traumatic, panic. And it took the practice of really noticing those negative times and really saying, okay, just, allow, breathe, be there. And it took time. And between those two, now when my husband says, no, it's raining, I'm not going to work today, I'm like, okay. And I actually really mean it.
Right.
I actually am like, I don't care. Stay home.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, shoot, this is acceptance in action.
Yes.
My kids are home because it's crazy right now. And it's just it's the winter and they're getting colds. And I'm like, okay, let's play a board game. And I put aside my work because I know I'm going to get back to it and I know it's going to be okay. And it's that's what the work can give you. That's the end result, is this everything's going to be okay.
Yes. Well, and you live in a part of the country that shut down, shut down for a long time, probably longer than most other spaces. Yeah. And so that can be really hard on a day-to-day basis. They say a lot of times in parenthood that the years are short, but the days are long. The days are long. And especially when you're dealing with the unknown, where you can't see an end in sight. So I think that's such an important time. And I think everybody in some form took stock of their life and where they were and what was making them happy and what wasn't, and what was working and what wasn't, because we had time to sit and think for a moment. And that got very uncomfortable at first. Like we reflected on earlier, this is not easy work, but also I think some really important practices for individuals and collective groups, organizations came out of it that make us better feeling about our life, about how we're going about it, and learn things about ourselves, and forced us to peel back some layers and okay, what do I need to do to embrace this? How do I find empowerment in this moment where it feels like a total frenzy and I've got no end mark of when this is going to switch over? And then I think you dealt with something too. And I had a conversation with this with Sarah from Clay Health a while back about how we're going to see some effects of this in our children, our teenagers, our 20-somethings. Adults are kind of working through it right now. That are going to be really interesting to see how it unfolds over the years, because, and it all depends on the dynamic you were in, how your families handled it, what you had available to you. But it was an interesting time. And I love how you speak to that, how you were able to kind of journey through that and be like, okay. And the PTSD, I think, people don't talk about that. They're like, all right, we're back, let's go. And they don't talk about the PTSD that comes with it that has to be dealt with. Yeah.
And it was shocking.
Yes. Yeah.
It was shocking for me. But I also was so incredibly grateful for all of the research I had done on mindfulness and gratitude during the pandemic. I wrote, being type A, that's what I did. I wrote 500 words a day. It was the thing that kept me sane because I needed a schedule. I needed a goal every day. And it was my way of carving out a little bit of something for me, something that I could feel like I was contributing and to give back, and also just to learn and grow during this time that felt so tight and really with no space to grow. And so thankfully, that is what helped me with my post-traumatic growth. In the end, it was like I planted the seed and now it's sprouted, and it's it's so different now. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for that. I wouldn't want to ever do it again, but
exactly.
There's a silver lining.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think a lot of people feel that way. And just how at work is, look how it's evolved now and what you're doing now. So and I can relate to that. That's kind of similar to where I'm at. We're down to the rapid fire. Name 5 activities that nourish you.
So I paint. And I specifically paint flowers. So I would definitely say painting flowers, walking outside. I do my hot mom walk every day, as I call it, and baking with my kids. Baking. And really, I take really long hot baths, and I cherish them because we're in a drought. So it's like, every once in a while, and I really love it. And the final one is, I've started to do this thing where I dance in the kitchen. And it's my way of practicing imperfect parenting, because I do it in the kitchen because that's where all the to-dos are, and sort of like the FU full sink and dirty floor and clutter on the dining room table and turn up the Taylor Swift and let's go.
Absolutely. Well, and I love too, it's good for our kids to see us having fun. I think as parents, sometimes we forget that we can still have fun being a parent, but so many times, and I was guilty of that. And I grew up in a household where my mom did not have fun and there was no fun. And it was so it's so good to see that and remember that part of yourself, because that's part of who we are. And it's an important part. I think it keeps us grounded. All right. 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
I think it's much more of the same. I mean, I want to feel kindness and compassion, gratitude. And I want to feel inspired. And I want to keep the feeling of enough going.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Enough. Yeah.
Enough.
If we could keep that at the forefront, instead of this more, but no, enough. I love that. Thank you so much.
That's what a practice of gratitude does, right? It turns what we don't have into what we're wanting. We say, forget it. And we turn and we look at what we already have as enough.
Yeah. And who we already are as enough.
Yes.
I think that's really important. Absolutely. All right, Stef, thank you so much for this time today. This was so valuable. What you're doing is so important. Podcast audience, again, go to our show notes, go to our resources on our website, embracinglayers.com. Check us out on all the socials. We will have all of this information we'll be sharing throughout the time leading up to the episode and the 2 weeks where it's the main episode that we're featuring. So many good things. Check out what Stef's doing. Listen to the episodes. Whether a woman at any stage in your life, this stuff is helpful. This stuff is important. It ties into keeping us grounded and keeping us focused on all we bring to the world and the good, and how we're made is valuable and important and unique and enough. I love that. That's gonna be my takeaway as we wrap this up is the enough piece. So thanks so much, Stef, for this time. Like I said, audience, you don't want to miss this stuff. It is great tools. It's great information. It's practical. It's applicable. So make sure you go to her website. She's got blogs. She's got all kinds of tools on there that you can participate along with her on this journey. And if you have any questions about any of it, you can email us at embracinglayers@gmail.com. You can DM us at embracinglayers, and when we can get you connected. But thanks again, Stef, for your time today, and podcast audience, have a great week.